still disagreement on what the problem was. If there's a flu outbreak on the poor side of town, some bigoted rich people might go, oh, well, it's not that big a problem. Let them deal with it. It's not a real problem. And the people closer to them will go, oh, this is a huge problem. We should do something about it. So, there were differences like that. And it's not to say that everything was great. But the difference now is because of social media, because of the internet, and this mass communication and I don't want to say democratization, but just sort of the opening up of information. Like anybody who has something that they think of as information can share it. And if enough people want to hear it, they'll find it. And then they can believe it or not, and so the problem now has become that we're almost back to the Salem witch days of groups of people who live in a kind of a information bubble, all believing the same thing. And there are plenty of people out there that are willing to take advantage of that for their own ends. A big example of that right now would be the QAnon nonsense, I guess. That's the only word I can think of, phenomenon, I suppose. I was torn between phenomenon and nonsense, and it's a bit of both. But, it is just absolutely, if you spend any time reading it, it's absolutely insane. It is the most ridiculous crap you've ever heard. And yet, there are thousands, maybe even millions of people that believe it because it suits a certain kind of need they have for right and wrong, absolutes in right and wrong, or a need to believe in something that fits with their, sort of wish fulfillment in a way. A lot of, here's dangerous territory that I will tread into lightly. A lot of religious people, some religious people, I won't say a lot because I can't make that claim. Some religious people, some highly religious people, are open to fantastic thinking, to believing in fantasy things. Because as we all know, religions are primarily based on belief. They say these things happened, and there is this deity or that deity or these supernatural things. You can't see any of this, but you must believe in it. Faith is what tells you what's true. You'll know. You'll feel it in your heart, that kind of thing. So basically that's fantastic thinking. It's the ability to say, okay, there is no physical evidence of this anywhere, but I believe in it because I want to, or because I was told to, or because I grew up believing it and it seems right, or it feels right to me, or whatever. So you can weigh that any way you want, but it is undeniable, I think, that some people who have that kind of belief system already are more prone to believing things that lack proof, because one of their most fundamental belief systems requires that they just have faith that it is true. So the QAnon thing, where that has worked, and I can't help but think it was intentionally molded this way, is to play on that same sort of notions of great good and great evil, absolute evil and absolute good, and judgment coming on the evil, and all these different things, all this stuff that is built into a lot of the major, at least Western religions. So it isn't a big jump for some people. I'll just put it that way. It isn't a big jump for some people who already believe that faith is the number one justification, let's say, for belief. I believe it. I believe in it. It speaks to me, therefore it is true for me. That kind of thinking can, not inevitably, but can lead one to, just believing any old thing that just sort of fits in with that theme. And so, be that as it may, that was a huge sidetrack. But my point is that kind of thing is the big, stepping back from that specific issue and just sort of going on a general, people believing in things that just are sheer nonsense and being misled by charlatans and con men. And that takes us to the Q thing, because the point that I didn't reference in that is important to remember is that it was all designed around this notion that Donald Trump, despite what he looked like and acted like and seemed to you to be, was actually the savior of the world kind of thing. So it was created as sort of a way of saying, all right, yeah, I know he looks like this, acts like this, behaves like that, has this horrible history, but in actual point of fact, he is secretly this savior that's come to, destroy all the awful people that you hate and should hate because they're demonic and they're space aliens. I don't know. I mean, there are lots of different subgenres of this Q thing, going down to lizard people that live underground and time travelers and clones. There's lots of clones involved. There are huge caverns underground where children are kept as slaves and used for tortured so people can take their I don't know. I mean, it's so, I'm sorry, my chair is really noisy. It's just so ridiculous that it's hard to even talk about with a straight face. And yet, there are a lot of people, I have spoken to, at least one or two of them, that seriously believe this stuff and seriously say, look, the evidence is there. It's right there. Just go to YouTube. Ooh, yeah, there's YouTube, the source of all knowledge. Anyway, I'm going to get off that because it's whatever it is. It's just, but it's something that, it is a problem, and it is one of many problems that we face moving forward. We have elected a new president, and I hope for big changes. I will be happy with at least smallish changes. Anything that points us and starts us in the right direction would be great. So I'm not going to complain too much too quickly, because it's a huge job that Mr. Biden and his team have undertaken, and it's going to be really difficult. All right. Getting back to story. So the next story is entitled, Biden Has No Reason to Back Down on Immigration Now. I agree with that. So after Joe Biden won the Democratic Party nomination, he made no adjustments to his aggressive pro-immigration agenda. Some ideas, a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants, have long been standard Democratic Party positions, but Biden's ideas went far beyond this. Biden's platform was probably as pro-immigrant as any winning candidate since Abraham Lincoln. Yet despite repeated attacks by President Trump, Biden stuck to his message, even on border and asylum issues, which many see as the most difficult politically. With public opinion on immigration even further on his side than the presidential vote count, he has absolutely no reason to back down now. I agree with that. The most remarkable moment in this campaign for me, as an immigration analyst, was when President Trump attacked Biden in the second presidential debate for the Obama-Biden administration allowing what he calls catch and release of immigrants at the border. Rather than pivoting back to normal Democratic attacks about Trump's child separation policy, Biden took Trump's bait and launched into an extended defense of exactly what Trump was attacking him for, even going so far as to counterattack Trump for forcing Central American asylum seekers to live homeless in dangerous cities in Mexico. Without Trump's anti-asylum policies, it is inevitable that the United States will have a very significant increase in immigrants requesting asylum. Of all the Trump policies, I believed, as many analysts still do, that these asylum restrictions would be the most difficult politically for Biden to end. Yet, Biden took his few minutes on national debate stage to assert that he's willing to embrace greater acceptance of asylum seekers as a good thing. If the new administration accepts them all at ports of entry, grants them status and employment authorization, there will not even be the issue of immigrants breaking the law to create any potential political liability. Now that he appears to have beaten Trump, will Biden suddenly reverse? It's possible. It wouldn't be the first time that Biden is flipped on immigration, but he absolutely has no political reason to change. He won on a pro-immigrant message. House Democrats won on a pro-immigrant message. Moreover, Biden is assuming office at a time when the public has never been more sympathetic to the pro-immigrant cause. For the first time in its 55-year history, Gallup's immigration poll found more support for increasing than decreasing immigration. Support for immigration grows when Gallup only asks about legal immigration. More than three-quarters tell Gallup that they believe immigration is a good thing. Pew Research Center polls find that large majorities reject that the argument immigrants increase crime. Okay, there's something wrong with the way this is written. Let me rewrite it as I go. Pew Research Center polls find that large majorities reject the argument that immigrants increase crime. There, I fixed it. That they tax the welfare state and that they do not assimilate. Trump has actually lost ground even among Republicans on his anti-immigration message. Even the old President Obama advisors who oversaw the most deportations ever and will likely resurface in a Biden administration understand that they have a mandate from Biden to gut and replace Trump's anti-immigrant agenda in a way that they did not until very late in Obama's term. I fully expect that the agencies will go beyond reversing them and create even better processes for immigrants, legal or otherwise. He will also push aggressively for Congress to enact legislation to create a path to citizenship for unauthorized immigrants and expand legal immigration. The most likely problem areas for Biden are on guest worker visas. Biden said he wanted to make the H-2A and H-2B guest worker programs for lesser skilled seasonal jobs less cumbersome, bureaucratic, and inflexible. Moreover, Biden will support expanding the number of high-skilled visas, but in both cases he also falls into the erroneous labor union narrative that these visas can hurt U.S. workers and calls for strong enforcement of the prevailing wage, a made-up governmental minimum wage for foreign workers. In the case of the H-1B skilled worker visa, Biden specifically calls for greater restrictions on entry-level wages, which could effectively stop the hiring of foreign college graduates by U.S. companies. Since nearly all employer-sponsored foreign workers enter first on temporary visas, restricting them would do very significant harm to both employers, foreign workers, and U.S. workers in complementary positions. And I look forward to complaining about Biden doing that if he does that. Anyway, overall, Biden has given immigrant advocates a reason for optimism. Yes, he has. He faced down President Trump's attacks and doubled down on his pro-immigrant positions. He may impose new restrictions on guest workers and not follow through on every campaign promise, but he will restart a legal immigration system that has almost entirely been stopped by this administration, and he will generally make positive reforms beyond that. And I agree with that entirely. And I will not launch into another protracted sidetrack because, I do it so often. Anyway, this next thing is maybe too long to read. I don't know if I have time for this. I'll start on it. If I don't finish it, maybe I can finish it next time. Okay. Finally, we have Trump didn't build his border wall with steel. He built it out of paper. What could that mean? In the middle of his first year in office, President Trump endorsed a bill so radically anti-immigrant that even most Senate Republicans couldn't stomach it. Trump claimed the bill would create a merit-based immigration system that protects U.S. workers and taxpayers. The measure would have replaced the country's current employer and family-centered system with a points-based program, awarding immigrants points for criteria such as age and extraordinary achievements, though the only two achievements that would have earned points were Nobel Prizes and Olympic medals. We get a lot of people. So many Nobel Prize winners and Olympic medalists trying to come here, and they're just locked down at the border. Anyway, but the debate around merit helped disguise what would have been the bill's most consequential effect: slashing legal immigration levels in half. Even for Trump loyalists, this was beyond the pale. The bill went nowhere, and several months later, the Senate voted 60-39 against advancing a similar proposal. As it turns out, the president didn't need Congress after all. Without ever signing a single immigration law or completing his famous wall, Trump has cut the flow of foreigners by executive fiat. This fiscal year, the United States is on track to admit half the number of legal immigrants it did in 2016. This would bring levels of legal immigration down to what they were in 1987, when the U.S. population was about a quarter smaller, substantially younger, and less in need of working-age immigrants than it is today. If this milestone has gone mostly unremarked, it's by design. It has been achieved through backdoor, boring-sounding bureaucratic decisions. Small bore and esoteric, though many of them are, collectively they have crippled the legal immigration system and choked the flow of newcomers into the United States. Through hundreds of administrative changes, the machinery of the U.S. immigration system has become even slower, more cruel, and more absurd than it was before. Americans may assume that most of what Trump has done, at least in the field of immigration, can be undone by Joe Biden, should he be elected, and he has been. But immigration analysts, lawyers, and federal officials warn that the country's immigration infrastructure will remain crippled long after Trump leaves office. Numbers of newcomers may be depressed for years, if not longer, diminishing the country's economic growth, global influence, and cherished role as a beacon for freedom and opportunity. This is likely to be true even if the next president tries to roll back one by one every single action Trump has taken. The immigration system is effectively two separate systems, one that deals with legal immigrants and another with those who are not authorized to be in the country. Some people, such as those who enter without permission as a means to request asylum, straddle both systems. In recent years, more than 1 million people have received legal permanent residence, i.e. officially immigrated, annually, with an additional 9 million or so receiving temporary non-immigrant visas to study, travel, work, and so on. The vast majority of immigrants living in the United States came here legally. Only about a quarter of the foreign-born are unauthorized. That is, they either crossed a border unlawfully or, much more often, overstayed their visas. For years, the overall population of legal immigrants has been growing, while the population of unauthorized immigrants has been shrinking. Since the housing bubble burst in 2007, well before Trump took office, more undocumented people have been leaving the country than have been arriving. Despite these trends, the president has repeatedly suggested the country is being overrun by illegals. From the start, Trump's rhetoric has targeted those undocumented immigrants. The president, the son and grandson of immigrants, says he has no problem with people who come to America the right way and obey the laws. I want people to come in, Trump said during the 2016 campaign. I want tremendous numbers of people to come in, and we're going to have that big, beautiful door in the wall. Well, this turned out to be a big, beautiful lie. Under the leadership of Stephen Miller, Trump's chief advisor on immigration matters, administration officials have been ordered to close every opening, shut every door, close every loophole, and then some, according to a senior Department of Homeland Security official quoted in Jean Guerrero's chilling new biography of Miller, Hate Monger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. Every immigrant possible, whether here lawfully or not, professional class or blue-collar, entrepreneur or scientist, adult or toddler, would be rejected, deported, or repelled. To the extent that Americans are aware of such policy changes, they're probably only familiar with the more gothic, telegenic horrors, particularly those visited upon unauthorized immigrants. That is, the nursing babies separated from their mothers when they crossed the border amid Trump administration's zero-tolerance family separations policy for asylum seekers. The abrupt deportations of undocumented immigrants who were otherwise law-abiding pillars of their communities, some of whose U.S. citizen spouses even voted for Trump, or the initial chaotic implementation of the Muslim ban, later rebranded a non-denominational travel ban. In Trump's most distorted visions, such policies would be reinforced by electrified border walls surrounded by a moat filled with alligators. These conditions were designed by the admission of administration officials themselves to be vividly, infamously cruel, so they might better deter would-be immigrants. The problem, of course, is that infamous cruelty is a double-edged sword. Immigrants learned of such policies, but so did Americans, many of whom preferred that their country not be wantonly inhumane. Whoa, what a surprise. After news coverage of Trump's zero-tolerance policy for asylum seekers prompted public outrage, for instance, the administration scaled back family separations. So the Trump officials simultaneously pursued another strategy for keeping out legal immigrants, one that's more resilient to public opinion because few realize it exists. They built a barrier not of steel and reptiles, but of paperwork. Stephen Miller, President Trump's chief advisor on immigration matters at the White House in June. That was a label for a photograph that you can't see. Let me go on. The legal immigration system, to be clear, has long been broken, but since Trump took office, his aides have undertaken some 450 mostly technical executive actions that have disfigured the system almost beyond recognition. Some changes rig the criteria for who counts as a good immigrant so that virtually no one qualifies. Some essentially try to trick still eligible applicants into filling out their paperwork incorrectly. Yet others involve the government simply failing to process applications or issue new documents, and at least one case blaming printer problems. We've all had those. These shifts, among countless others, mean that to reach Trump's big, beautiful door, immigrants must now navigate an obstacle course crisscrossed by riddles and red tape. For instance, one rule is allegedly designed to make sure immigrants who apply for green cards and other visas can financially support themselves when they get here. This might sound reasonable enough until you consider how that standard is assessed. The regulatory language says an application can be denied if an official decides that the immigrant might someday use government benefits at any time in the future. What criteria are used to predict this? Among other things, the mere fact that a person is applying for a green card is considered a strike against an immigrant's application for a green card. Asked to explain this apparent catch-22, a spokesperson for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services said, circuitously, that officials must consider an applicant's prospective immigration status and expected period of admission as part of the totality of the circumstances analysis. I want to try and read that again just to see if I can figure out what it means. Okay. Officials must consider an applicant's prospective immigration status, like what it may be in the future, an expected period of admission, how long it'll take them to get in, as a part of the totality of the circumstances analysis. Okay. Anyway, this self-defeating policy alone, known as the public charge rule, is expected to reduce legal immigration by hundreds of thousands of people per year. Other changes have ruled out or attempted to rule out entire categories of once eligible immigrants. For example, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued an edict in 2018 that severely restricted asylum for victims of gender-based or gang violence. Other rules since have further narrowed eligibility standards or tried to. Restrictions on asylum quickly became self-perpetuating. As the administration made asylum harder to obtain, approval rates plummeted, and officials pointed to lower and lower rates as justification for even more draconian policies. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security has repeatedly instituted policies that result in the expulsion of asylum seekers without allowing them to seek asylum. These likely violate both U.S. law and international agreements on human rights. Thousands are living in filthy tent cities across the southern U.S. border under Trump's Remain in Mexico program, whose official, more Orwellian name is Migrant Protection Protocols. Often the administration cites concerns about national security, physical or economic, to shut out immigrants. This excuse has been deployed frequently during the coronavirus pandemic. Somehow, children were labeled a risk to national economic security on the apparent premise that even a 7-year-old might steal an American's job. Applicants for O-1 visas, the type awarded to individuals with extraordinary ability, were similarly refused, with the government citing security concerns. Even for visa applicants who still have a shot at qualifying, the process will soon become more expensive, at least if the administration prevails in ongoing litigation regarding an across-the-border increase in fees. The cost for naturalization application, for instance, would nearly double, from $640 to at least $1,160. Costs have risen indirectly, too. Common immigration forms are longer and more complicated. When Trump took office, the main adjustment of status form for green card applicants was 6 pages long, with 8 pages of instructions. The form has since stretched to 20 pages, with 45 pages of instructions, not including the additional reams of supporting evidence and peripheral forms now required. An update to the form and instructions recently proposed by the administration would be even longer. The main adjustment of status form for green card applicants was 6 pages long. Oh, wait, I just read that. Sorry. Wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to end there because something it's in there twice. Okay, anyway, I've run out of time anyway, so it doesn't matter. I can't read the rest of this, which is too bad. I'm going to pick this up next time from somewhere in here and read it again because I think this is interesting and important. But anyway, I'll just close with saying that for the moment, we won. I don't see any way that Trump can overturn the results, but he is trying, and he seems to be convinced that he can somehow magically get courts to invalidate votes or whatever. So we will keep an eye on that as this goes forward. But should reality and truth prevail, we'll have a new president starting next year, and we will be able to start on fixing some of the damage that's been done to this country, and not a moment too soon. So we'll see you next time, either on the radio. We won't see you, but we'll hear you, or you'll hear me, or something, or on UPTV. And until then,